Okay, so good evening, everybody. And where I'm from, as most of you know, I'm in Dubai. So good morning to the other ones of you. As a lot of you are aware, St George's University, we've been coming into New Zealand quite a lot recently, and we're getting a number of really good applications and quite a number of good students that are starting. And we're very lucky today to be able to have Dr. Enright, who is in Hawke's Bay as we speak, and he is a St George's graduate. One of the things that I've been trying to do is to show everybody, that we do our pathways and back to New Zealand for those who want to come back to New Zealand. And Dr. Enright has very kindly said today that he will do a little bit of a presentation to you, showing you a bit about what he does. He is a spine and orthopedic surgeon, and he is, as I said, based in Hawke's Bay. But he is also very kindly going to open up the floor at the end of the presentation for you guys to pick his brains, as I would say, and to basically ask him any questions that you may have. So without further ado, I will turn my camera off so I do not distract you. And I will let people come in as they go, and I'll leave the floor to you, Dr. Enright. Thank you very much indeed.
Sure. Well, thank you, Sebastian. Hi, everyone. Yep, my name's Austin Enright. I'm a consultant orthopedic and spine surgeon in Hawke's Bay. Been here for 5 years now, and a year in Auckland before that. Now, can everyone see the presentation?
Yeah.
You can see it?
Yeah, we can see it. Not in presentation mode, just the slides.
Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, this is about me and my journey, how I went, got to SGU and what I did after SGU, and then ended up here in Hawke's Bay. So this is where it all began for me. That's Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And I went to University of Victoria there. And I didn't really start wanting to do medicine, to be honest. I actually thought I was going to do engineering. Here's just a map showing where Victoria is in Canada and the US. So I actually went into engineering at first. I did 2 years of mechanical engineering and really just found that was not for me. So I took some time off and sort of refigured out what I wanted to do. And at that point, then getting into dealing with the human body, and medicine came a little bit later. So I went back and did a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree, along with a specialization in kinesiology and high performance sport.
I'm just going to interrupt you. The slides are not, I think you're clicking down, but we're still stuck on the journey. So the slides aren't coming down. So if there's a share in the bottom, you can make the screen bigger, and then you can just click down, or you can just touch slide 2, slide 3 with your cursor, and that should bring it down.
Is that working?
Yeah, it's not. There you are. There you are. Absolutely.
And how about now?
Yeah, and then you can click the slides as you go.
That work?
Perfect. Yep, that's working.
Perfect. Okay, so there's the map, the stars where Victoria is, and we'll just click on through here. So as I said, I was finished a bachelor's degree of science in kinesiology and high performance sport. And in about my second or third year, I thought that medicine was really where I wanted to go. And eventually at the end of my degree, I decided to apply to SGU. I'd heard about SGU through I think it was a daughter of a colleague of my mother. She's a doctor as well. And they had gone to SGU many years ahead of time. And so we started looking at that, applied to SGU, got in, and then had the option of starting there's a world map to showing things, to go into the Keith B. Taylor's Global Scholars Program, of which I was in the pilot class for that. So very first class out of the mark. So that took me across the Atlantic Ocean to Newcastle, UK, in which I did my first year of medicine there, which was quite an experience. One, because we were the first class, it was quite small. I think there was only 20 of us in the class there for the first year. And it's certainly a great place to be if any of you have that option. It's certainly something to think about. That's a picture of Newcastle. And then up there on the map, you can see the star. That's where Newcastle is. It's quite a place to live. Just a few pictures here. Obviously, the Newcastle United is there, which is pretty much runs the city. And so when in Newcastle, you do exactly the same classes as the group, the same cohort or year or term as you. In Grenada does, you even write the exams at exactly the same time. And for me, I thought that really worked well. Again, it was a good experience for the school. I think we probably got exactly the same out of it as the Grenada group, but there were some real benefits, I thought. So there's a few things about Newcastle. Obviously, there's lots of pubs. I think when we arrived there, we did a information session and someone told us that you could go to a different pub every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, every year of your 3-year degree and not go to the same place twice. Obviously, the football is ever prevalent. The Geordies, they're fantastic people. You will probably struggle to understand what they say for at least half of the year. And if you want to test that out, you can watch a bit of the Geordie Shore TV show and you can see how just thick their accents can be. Although surprising that Canadians do play rugby, we do play rugby. And so I played for the medical rugby football club there, which is actually based out of Newcastle University's medical school. So you have to be a doctor or a dentist or a student of either to play on the team. And it was certainly a lot of fun. We traveled all over England playing, and that was quite a good time. And I also managed to play ice hockey for the University of Northumbria, and we won a British University's national championship while I was there. Another good thing that I know a lot of my classmates as well as myself enjoyed was the travel that you were able to. There's a picture or a map of Newcastle at the center of that spider's web, and those are all the places you can fly to direct. So certainly for being Canada or a place like New Zealand, getting to Europe is a long way. So once you're there, being able to travel, you know, after exams to go away for a weekend to any of those places was certainly a nice benefit that many of us took a lot of advantage of, and it was really good. Now, obviously, that's all the fun stuff. The first year of med school, it's a big change. And if you're coming from undergraduate work, it moves just a whole lot quicker. The information comes exceedingly fast. And you basically do in an hour-long lecture what you would do in a week as undergrad. So in some ways that's quite good. You've really got to study, you've got to be well organized to get through it, and it is a big change. But I thought SGU put a lot of effort into preparing us in the first couple of weeks of saying, this is how we suggest you'd study. These were things that have worked in the past. And I thought that really pushed things along and made it easier. And that wasn't something I'd ever had before. Study groups, tutoring sessions, those are all available, and I would take advantage of them. And then we didn't have this because we were the first class, but once you get to Grenada, and for people like you that are applying, where you're not the first class, always talk to the term ahead. They can sort of steer you through some of the loopholes and things. So after a year in Newcastle, I then started in Grenada, which you can see on the map there. I'm sure many of you have looked up where Grenada is, but just in case you're not totally sure, it's the bottommost chain just above Trinidad and Tobago, or the Caribbean chain. and it is a beautiful island to live, different than living in a Western country in a lot of ways, but certainly the pictures of the campus and things do it justice. That's what the campus really does look like and what the water really does look like. Now, just a bit of trivia for any of those can see what these pictures all have in common. That, as some of you may know, that the US forces invaded Grenada, apparently to save the medical students from communism. And Heartbreak Ridge is a film there with Clint Eastwood, and that's actually a movie about them invading Grenada. So if you're interested to have a look, it's it's a good movie, but it also gives you just a little bit of idea of what things might have been back then. And if you can see the picture of the school, that's the school, and that's actually the runway of the airport right behind it there. And that was changed after the invasion. Should the school ever need to be evacuated, you could go straight onto the runway and out of there. Second year of med school, things get harder, but it's sort of a stepwise fashion. Things are harder for year one, and you think, wow, this is good. I'm sort of on top of it at the end of the year one, and then year two comes. And things sort of pick up speed more. It's everything basically in your first 2 years is about that USMLE Part 1. And it's a US licensing exam that pretty much everyone writes. And the score you get on that has a bit of a prediction of sort of what spots you might be open to residency in the US if you were to stay there. So really everything is about that. And it certainly starts to become more and more prominent in everything you think about, but everyone gets through it. And it just takes hard work and sticking to it. And again, talking to the term ahead and often buying their books, because in Grenada, everything has to be flown in, and that means it has to go out too. So if you can just buy the books ahead from the term ahead, it can be quite a huge savings to you. Now, a lot of people want to know, what do you do when you're not studying, which is most of your life. There's lots of things to do. Obviously, the beach is a great one. And I think it's particularly notable after your exams when you can go to the beach with all your friends. And usually there's some big beach parties and things either thrown by SGU or just by people in general. Carib is the beer there. You'll certainly become acquainted with that. And certainly for me, a big thing was being down there during Canadian winter and phoning home, and it would be minus 20 degrees and you're sitting on the beach with your feet in the sand. It was a good feeling. There's lots of intramural sports. There's some pictures there. Flag football, basketball's a big one. Soccer's another one. The gym facilities have changed a lot since I was there. So these are the new pictures. I've never actually seen them, but that certainly is a place a lot of people go. There's scuba diving, easily accessible, as well as a fair bit of volunteering out in Grenada. I lived on campus, of which those pictures are easily available, and you can see what that looks like. But this is where I lived when I was not living on campus. And places like this are around. It's often you go there the first term and you live on campus, and that's good because you make lots of friends. And then you sort of find out who's leaving the next term, and then you're sort of angling yourself to get a place off of them. This is an apartment block, which I think it was all students living in, and it was quite good. In Grenada, you get around by either the school buses or the reggae bus, which there's all these little vans that hop around, and they just stop to wherever you are, and you hop in and you pay however much it is. It's usually quite cheap, and it just stops and goes the whole way around the island. And they do sort of have routes, but also not really, but they are a pretty fun way to get around the island. The culture is a lot of fun. The picture of the guy with the horns on his head, that's Carnival, which is a big festival that happens on most of the Caribbean islands, and that's the Grenadian one. It's sort of like Mardi Gras, but with a Caribbean flair. The picture on the bottom there is called Fish Fridays, which up the opposite end, the north end of the island, the opposite end from the school, on Friday nights, there's just this massive fresh fish sort of market where everything is cooked there, sort of street style. And usually a whole bunch of you go up in a bus to that, and that makes a good Friday night. And then obviously the Grenadian rum, that's a big part of their culture down there, and it's easily available sort of everywhere and usually quite cheap. Now, things to know is Grenada is quite a poor country, especially coming from a Western country like New Zealand or Canada or the United States. You can see there's listed 117th from 126 developing countries in terms of its external debt. There's a massive disparity between the university students and the locals. It's not something that causes friction, but it is probably something you need to be aware of, that often you going as a university student, you're going to have probably more money than many of those people will ever have in their lives. And there are some law differences that may be worth knowing. There's nothing drastic, but there are some to know before you go there. So at the end of my second year, finished all the schooling, did my USMLE Part 1 and passed, thank God. And then I got placed in New York City. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. I'd never been to New York before, came in on a plane, knew no one really, found an apartment near to live. I was in Flushing Hospital in Queens initially, and it was quite an experience. There's some pictures in New York, really exciting place to live, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. Now, things I found the most interesting was in Queens. It's the most ethnically diverse urban area on the planet. And so within Queens alone, there's 138 languages spoken. And you can imagine working in a hospital, a public hospital there, that a lot of those languages are going to come in. Spanish, where I was definitely the predominant language, which I spoke no Spanish when I started, but you sort of figure it out and piece together what you need to know. And most of the hospitals actually at every bedside have a 2 headset phone, if you will. And you pick up the phone and say, I need a translator for whatever it is. And if it's something that's common, they'll say, yep, no problem. And they'll have someone on the line in 10 seconds or so. And if you have some of them definitely getting down the bottom of those lists at 138 languages spoken, sometimes they say, right, we'll phone you back in an hour when we found someone. And then you have your medical interviews or your even your bedside chats with the patient through these phones. You talk, it gets translated, they hear it, and back and forth it goes. And for me, that was quite an eye-opening experience. In your third year, I really enjoyed all my clinical time. I don't know if everyone is like that. The first 2 years I found you really had to put the work in, and it's hard going. It was pure textbook sort of learning. They try and make it as clinical as they can, but I think once you really get to the hospitals, that's when you really think, wow, this is what I wanted to do. And there you do rotations on pediatrics, surgery, general medicine, obs, gynae, and psychiatry. And that basically makes up the thrust of your third year. And I did all of mine except for psychiatry in the one hospital. They usually try and keep you in one place now, I think. But it's quite a good year. You get to experience all sorts of things, see really medicine as a whole, because I think often you go in and you think you have an idea what it is, but when you actually do some of those things, you realize either you love it or sometimes you hate it, which is kind of useful in trying to pick a career path out of medicine or at the other end of med school. Other things, New York was great. Played rugby again for a team called the Village Lions, which was fantastic. We went to the national championships and those sorts of things, and it was just a lot of fun. Great way to meet people outside of your med school group. I'd probably be remiss and likely shot if I didn't say that I actually met my wife in New York City. And just to clarify, SGU makes no promises that you'll actually meet your partner in New York City. At the end of my third year, I decided to go back to the UK and do some clinical time there. So I flew off to Canterbury in the south of the United Kingdom. There's some pictures of it there. And I did rotations in both anesthesia and then in ED. It was a great place to work, big change from the American systems, but really enjoyed that change. It was quite good. The UK system obviously is much more reflective of what it is like in New Zealand. So for a lot of you, that probably will feel a bit closer to what it would like to be when you come back here when you're done. But I thoroughly suggest, doing some of these overseas ones, and really take advantage of those options that SGU has for you. I then, obviously being Canadian, wanted to try and get a residency spot in Canada. And so I did an elective in orthopedics in Saskatoon, which is right in the middle of Canada. And so I spent 4 weeks there. And that really was hugely beneficial to me, both from an experience on the orthopedic service, but also in trying to land references are really what fourth year is all about, in trying to get a spot in orthopedic or in whatever specialty you'd want, as well as hopefully getting into their program. If they've seen you, especially coming from an overseas medical school, if they see you and know you, they're a whole lot more likely to pick you. I then moved one province over to Winnipeg and again spent some time doing electives there. Both of these are now out of SGU's network, which I'm not sure if it's still the same, but you used to get so much time to do outside of the network. And certainly it's possible, at least if it's still going with SGU, you could come and do electives in New Zealand if that was what you wanted, maybe be close to home, use some of the connections that you might have locally. I did pediatric orthopedics in Winnipeg, and then went back to New York City to finish more of the core rotations of the fourth year, as well as you have to be within the SGU network for anything outside of those specific ones when you're not in it. And basically everything in the whole med school time, at least if you're a Canadian or American student, is really about trying to match. And the match is a program where they take all of the applicants and interview them and then rank them 1 through however many, and then all the applicants apply to all the places, and then they rank where they would like to go 1 to however many, and there's an algorithm that puts them all together. And on one day called the match day, you log in to the computer and it tells you where you matched and what you're doing, and you're legally bound to take that spot if you've proceeded all the way through it. So it's a massive day, and certainly at a school like SGU, where most students are Canadian or American, a lot of people's lives are sort of set on a pathway that day, and there's obviously usually a big party after that. And like I said, it's all about the electives. Your USMLE scores matter, and your interviews you do when you go matter, but it's all about getting that face time at the program you want to be at and really putting on a good show when you're there. At the end of med school, you graduate, hopefully. And this is what the graduation ceremony looks like in New York City. Quite a special day for you and your family. And it's a lot of fun. And then one day, the big envelope comes in the mail and your medical certificate arrives. That's me with mine. Unfortunately, it was the weekend after the regional rugby championships, and you can see someone's obviously gotten the better of me, but I thought it was just such a great picture of the day that I opened that. It's hard to forget. So in my journey, I ended up going back to Canada. I matched into orthopedic surgery at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. It's a 5-year program, and you can see that's what I looked like when I started the program. That's actually my son dressed up as me for a career day or something this year. And Winnipeg, known for hot summers, so 25 to 40 degrees for about 2 months, and then cold, cold winters for 5 or 6 months where you probably do a good 6 to 8 weeks below -30. Good place to live. You get used to the cold, but it is a lot of fun when life doesn't stop much just because it's cold in the winter. Here's a picture of me digging out the barbecue one day. Really wanted a barbecue and we had some mild weather, so I decided to dig it out. Now, just to put things in perspective a little bit for you, there's a picture of Canada, and Manitoba is highlighted in the red, and that's the best I could sort of get for giving you some idea of how big New Zealand is compared to that. And where I trained, we were the only tertiary center in the province, so everything came to us. So the tertiary centers are the biggest hospitals, so things like Middlemore, Christchurch would be the big ones in New Zealand. And for us, that was our coverage area, all the way from, we took some of the northern parts of the United States, all of Manitoba, parts of the province next door, and then actually all the way up to the North Pole. So sometimes you'd be getting calls from GPs or nurses in far-flung northern Canada saying somebody had had a snowmobile accident, run into a polar bear, that sort of thing, and could they fly him down to us? And sometimes it would be, a 6-7 hour flight down for them. Orthopedics is made up of trauma, so obviously people crashing their cars, falling off things. Collision sports usually fit into trauma. Pediatric orthopedics, obviously kids break lots of bones, and that really is what makes up probably 50% of my work now. Certainly at the public hospital, it'll be those top two. Joint replacements, hip and knee replacements are a big part. That is part of my practice, but not a huge amount. Sports injuries, so people that injure their ACLs, shoulders, is another part of orthopedics. We train in that, but that's not what I do. And then spine, that probably makes up about 50% of my time. Now, residency training, I think is probably pretty hard going in any specialty, but you do a lot of call. That's why you call a resident, because you live in the hospital pretty much. You don't really, but that's how much you're there. So you get used to working hard, not a lot of sleep. Things are changing now, so that's getting a little bit less, probably so even than when I went through training. But it's a lot of fun. You're learning a lot of stuff, but it is a lot of hard work, and just part of the program if you're going to get it, if you want to do any of the specialties sort of training. Then I finished my fellowship from the Royal College of Surgeons of Canada, and that was myself and my two local colleagues. There was 3 of us a year in orthopedics, and those were the 2 of us on the day that we all passed our exams. So that was definitely one of the biggest days of your life. And so we all finished off there, and then all went off to various places in the world to do a fellowship, and that's what brought me to New Zealand. So I went from Winnipeg to Auckland to Middlemore to do a spine fellowship there. I'd never been to New Zealand before. Seemed like a good idea. Happened to coincide with the Lions tour of New Zealand, strangely enough, my wife thinks. And it was a really good year. I didn't have any job that I was especially going to after fellowship, but a locum job. So that's a job that's sort of temporary, came up for a year in Hawke's Bay. We decided to stay and then just never left. So once you finish that, you finally get to work as the boss. And so I work at Hawke's Bay DHB, as well as my own private practice, and that's called Hawke's Bay Spine. You can see those are my rooms in the bottom picture. So I work out of the hospital, which I really enjoy. I think it makes a nice change to be out of the hospital for both myself and for the patients coming. And it's just a really nice place to work. My week generally looks, Mondays is sort of paperwork based, lots of ACC paperwork to write and reports, et cetera. Tuesday, I have clinics at the public hospital, and usually my Tuesday mornings are where the pictures there. There's somebody's broken their wrist. It tends to be lots of it, so lots of casts. And if people need surgery, then we're looking to put them onto the list that they can be done on another day, either by myself or one of the other consultants. We also see lots of patients that need hip and knee replacements. Hopefully after your first term of anatomy, you'll be able to explain what those x-rays really mean and why, but that's sort of what they look like before on the left and what they look like after. So that's part of my practice, generally just out of the public system. And then in Wednesdays, I usually do a day of private clinic. Because it's mostly spine, a lot of back pain, a lot of disc herniations, those sorts of things. So a lot of examining people, a lot of looking at MRIs, which again, hopefully at the end of your anatomy term, you'll be able to tell me what all those are. And then on Thursdays is usually operating privately. And hopefully all the patients look like the patient on the right, not always, but that's what we aim for. And then the x-rays, that's actually that's not an x-ray I've done, I borrowed that from a friend, but that's actually a 4-level disc replacement. And we do that by going through people's belly to get to their spine, which again, after your anatomy, you'll be able to know all the structures that are in between there. Friday is my public hospital operating day. Usually that's going to be dealing with trauma. So you can see there's a picture of someone broke their femur, their big thigh bone, and we put a rod down the inside of that, as well as screws at the top and the bottom to hold it all together. Call for me is every second Thursday. I alternate with one of my partners for Thursdays, and then we take usually every 7th weekend. So that means Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So not really too onerous by any stretch. So that's what my journey looked like. And it's all sort of what you make your journey and what you decide to do from here. So yeah, I guess I'll just open it up to any questions you guys might have. Some of the, I guess, specifics about the education actually while you're at SGU, I probably don't have the answers. It may have changed since I was there, but certainly about what to do after and things, I do have a few ideas.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was, I loved it. It was great. Okay, guys, ladies and gents, I'm sure you got lots of questions and very happy to take them. You can either open up your mic and just ask, or put your hand up, ask the question, or if you wish, you can just type in the chat box, and I can read out the questions to Dr. Enright, and he can answer the question. Okay, so Eric's got a question. What process did you go through to be a doctor in New Zealand? Did you have to sit any tests?
No, because I came as a fellow of the Royal College of Canada, they obviously wanted a lot of paperwork. And then as my first year that I was here as a fellow, you're actually done your training. So they counted that as a year of supervised practice. And then my first year here in Hawke's Bay, I just had to discuss the cases and things I had done with our head of department, and that counted as a second year of supervised practice. And then after that, I was signed off and went from there. So there was no exams to write, but 2 years of practice, of which the fellowship counted as one.
Right, and that would be after the residency, then you're pretty much good to go.
Yes, yeah.
Can I ask a question on behalf of, I guess, everybody? What do you think the key advantages for a New Zealand student would be to choose to go and study at St. George's?
I think two things. I think one, you're gonna get the same medical education that you would get as a Canadian or American. At the end of the day, I think it comes out the same as what you would get here in New Zealand. But I think from my experience of being SGU and from actually talking to program directors that make the decisions of who gets into the residency programs and things, some of them would say they actually prefer people that had gone to SGU or had gone outside, because you've had to fight for everything. And you've got to have sort of a sense of adventure. And, you know, you haven't, you sort of taken the easier road, if that makes sense. But I don't think medically you come out with any advantage that you do versus you would in New Zealand, but I think you come back with a whole lot wider experience.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, question from Fleur. Does everyone have to do the USMLE, or is it just if you want a US residency? I can answer that, but
I was going to say you might be better at that.
Okay, so if you want to get residency in the US, then you have to take the USMLE. With SGU, we are predominantly a US medical school. So you do have to take the USMLE, because you do that whilst you're in the program itself. Okay, so just before you have to pass the USMLE before you do the clinical portion, which is the last 2 years of the 4MD. Now, if you finish the clinicals, you can come back to New Zealand straight away if you wish. However, there are very, very few clinical positions and what we call residency in the US positions in New Zealand. As you may or may not know, there's very limited medical spots in the 2 medical schools in New Zealand, and they're very much on a quota for the 2 universities, Auckland and Otago. So it would be advisable to do residency, because then you don't have that struggle to try and find clinical or residency positions in New Zealand, or what they call internships in New Zealand. And you would also have to take the licensing exam in New Zealand, etc., to which we are approved and you're allowed to, but it's a better option, I would suggest. It's up to you, but to do the residency in the US. Again, you get the salaries are fairly strong in the US as well in residency. So yeah, but it's entirely up to you. You can do one or the other.
I'll just make one point about that. When you're going through this, write every exam that you think you will ever need while you're in med school, because trust me, you get a few years out and you do not want to go back and have to relearn that stuff. And there's a lot that you will have forgotten. So if it's fresh in your mind, write every exam you have to. I did that with my Canadian and American exams, and it really, you just study once and write 2 exams. Right.
Mia, you'd like a question?
Hi, fellow Canadian here.
Hi.
I find it's pretty interesting that you didn't decide to go to Toronto or McGill, just considering that they give you pretty much exactly the same accreditations as St. George's University. So why didn't you go there?
One, for me as a British Columbia student to get into Toronto or McGill, I think there's only 5 seats out of however many they get in.
I mean, so BC is also equally good.
Yeah, so UBC, I didn't get in. That was kind of as simple as it was.
I can help and answer that question as well. There are very, very few medical schools in Canada, and you have got to be exceptionally lucky to get into medical school in Canada. You're going to need an undergraduate, 4-year undergraduate degree program from where you would be, Mia, and you'd need to get a 4.0 GPA, and then you would need to be exceptionally lucky to get a seat. I mean, there are so many 4.0 GPA students. I mean, a lot of SGU students they have 4.0 GPAs as well, but there's so few seats. Same issue in New Zealand, same issue in the UK, same issue in Australia. There are just not enough medical schools that have seats for students to get into. So, you know, this is kind of one of the reasons why we were founded as well. But yeah, that's the challenge. Okay, so we have a question from Wei Wei. If the candidate has finished a bachelor study doctor and worked as a doctor in a hospital in China, is it available to do credit transfer and only do 1 to 2 years to get a degree in the US? I'll answer that question because you might not know the answer. If you've got a bachelor's degree in the in China or in anywhere, then you would join a 4-year MD. You have a bachelor's of science, you would then come into the 4-year MD, which is basically what Dr. Enright had. He had a bachelor's degree, and then you do a 4-year MD degree.
Okay, so no matter what major, because I received 2 inquiries. One major is medicine, and another major is in, I think, just surgery. So no matter what major they study, so they just need to enroll a 4 years MD program.
Yeah, correct.
Oh,
correct. I'd love to look at I'd love to look at those transcripts, and I can give you a better sort of view. But yeah, I'm pretty sure from what you've said, it would be a 4-year MD. And
can I just jump in and say that it would depend, they would need to have done the prerequisite courses in chemistry and biology, and their grades would need to be pretty good to get the 4-year MD offer as well.
Right. Organic chemistry, all sorts. Good. Okay. Any more questions? Kay, hi. Saw your camera come
Hi.
on. How are you?
Good, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can indeed.
Yep.
Cool. I just had a question. So residency is therefore difficult for someone to get in New Zealand, from what you're saying. So if they do their residency, US, UK, wherever, then they get into the realms of turning into the specialist training mode. Those spaces then are available in New Zealand. It's not sort of closed shop for Otago and Auckland graduates?
Yes, correct. Yeah, so it's, you know, sorry to interrupt this, Dr. I just know the system. Okay, so you have a standard route. It's like Australia, right? You have a standard route and you have a specialist route. Yeah, the standard route would be once you've graduated from SGU, which is an MD degree, you can then come back, but it's super challenging because of the lack of positions. So the specialist route is you've been clinically trained, you've done residency, then it's much, much easier, and then you take out the licensing exam. Yeah, exactly. And also in residency in the US, you know, you're making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. I don't know how much you made, Dr. Enright, but I mean, the residency is quite, you know, I mean, nowadays that's kind of what you're making, which so it kind of covers at least half, if not 3/4 of the cost of the medical school.
Yeah. I had another question about the matching. Sorry. So that whole all-important matching. So assuming that you pass everything at SGU and you pass the thing with lots of letters, USMLE.
USMLE,
yeah. Yep. Does everyone get matched somewhere, or are there people who don't?
You want to answer that? Do you know the statistics? It might have changed from when you got.
I'll let you answer it because it probably has changed.
Yeah. Okay. So at the moment, SGU, we're looking at anything between 89 and 94% residency match rate. Not everybody does. Not everybody does. But I mean, we've got a very strong residency match rate. And one thing that has changed from when Dr. Enright did the USMLE to what it is now. Is it's changed from a board score, and he mentioned it earlier on in the presentation that the board score was very, very important in your USMLE step 1. That has now changed to a pass or a fail. Okay, so as of 2022, I don't know if you knew this, Dr. Enright, but it changed to a pass or a fail. So the criteria of what residency directors, the people who are hiring you, are looking for has changed. The most important thing on the number 1 criteria is how many letters of recommendation you get from attending physicians to the residency director in the specialty what you want to do, which luckily we now, and I don't know how many teachers teaching hospitals we had back when you were there. At the moment, we've got over 75 hospitals in the US, UK, and Canada. So graduates are coming out with a lot of letters of recommendation. Hence, our residency match rate is going up and up and up. And it's probably a lot higher than what it was nowadays to what it was when he graduated.
Yep, that sounds right.
Cool.
The other
Thank
thing
you.
is the letters that you speak of, because you can get the letters from within the program. And that's why I said, if you go and you actually spend time at that center and do well, they then know you and they kind of literally write themselves the letter, if that makes sense. And if you can't get the one you want, go to the one next door. And that's what I did in Canada, because they all know each other. And so if you get a reference from somebody who knows the program director, or they know each other, it carries a whole lot more weight. It shouldn't, but it does.
Right. Hopefully that answered everything, Kate. Okay, any more questions? Don't be shy. Far away. Come on. I know it's getting late in New Zealand, but it's not often that you get a doctor in front of you to give you the wears and tears. Is the medical school competitive? Yes, we are. Yeah, we're fairly competitive. Yeah, I'll answer that one. We're fairly competitive, but the difference between us and, as Mia was saying, you know, and asking about Manitoba and McGill and everything like that, as Dr. Enright said, they have 4 or 5 seats. We have seats. So if you, long as you get the grade and you know you hit our criteria, you've got a fairly good chance. And we have Bridget here, who is, you see her waving at you. She's our office in Auckland, and she and I will help you all the way through your journey, and then make sure you're very, very well prepared for when you get interviewed to get into the medical school. Okay, Harriet's asking you a question. If you do your preclinical years in Grenada, what would be the average amount of years a student would spend in Grenada be? Okay, again, you might not know this answer, sorry. The preclinical, because he did after graduation. So the preclinical, you have 2 options. You can either do the preclinical in the UK, where Dr. Enright did his first year of his 4MD, and you can either do start in Grenada, or you could start in our UK campus, where you'd only spend 1 year, or 3 years if you're an NCEA student. So you can spend 1 year or 1 year in Grenada minimum, or you can spend 3 years in Grenada minimum, because it sounds like you'd probably be a 5MD program. A lot of these students, Dr. Enright, are high school students. So we have that 5 year. Yeah, we have that 5 year. But any more questions? Okay, so yes, there is. If you don't mind me asking, can I ask how long did it take you to pay back all the expenses for the medical school, including living expenses? There you go, Eric.
Question.
Great question.
I didn't pay it off in residency. Residency in Canada is not particularly well paid. So I think I was probably into consultancy before that was all fully paid off, to be fair. Rates may have gone up since I came through training. They may be more in the US. Obviously, the Canadian dollar doesn't go as far compared to the US, so that's part of it. But it is a big expense, and you have to factor that in to that decision. But you know, I think everyone I went through school with, some were carrying lots of debt, some were carrying no debt, but kind of everyone came through, and I think everyone financially has come out of it fine. But I couldn't speak to across the board. You guys might have a better idea about that.
Yeah, Canada's quite similar, to be honest with you, as New Zealand, as from where I'm from, the UK. We're all Commonwealth. So unfortunately, most of our systems are government funded, right? And as a result, the salaries are not so big in where we're from. And So the residency or internships, you don't actually get an awful amount of money. This was another reason why I was mentioning with Kay earlier, Kay Gray, when she asked a question, doing residency in the States gets your payback faster. It definitely pays a vote. Rishti has a question. For the preclinical years, is it harder if you do it through a 5-year MD program or only do 1 year of preclinical than the 7-year program with 3 years of preclinical? Rishti, it is 7 years would be too much with what you're doing. I know your educational background. It's doing a 5-year or a 6-year would be ample for you, ample. Eric, again, then is it harder to get residency in the US than in any other countries? No, not with us. It's not. We have, as I said, anything between an 89 and 94% US residency match rate. And again, the reason for that being is because we have so many teaching hospitals. And as Dr. Enright said, is doctors know doctors. You've got lots of letters of recommendation. Let's say you want to do a residency in the US. You do your clinicals in the US, in hospitals in the US, you're getting letters of recommendation, and they're going to, let's say it's in New York, to New York hospitals. And then this is why our match rate's fairly high. Well, it's phenomenally high, actually.
And I'd say there's a lot of places there compared to New Zealand, which is what you spoke to earlier. Yeah. There's just so many more residency positions in such a big country with such a shortage of doctors.
Right.
Yeah, and again, matching into Canada was difficult from SGU. There's only a couple of spots to go to. So as a backup, I was trying to secure an orthopedic residency at Lenox Hill in New York City. And I went and did a month there with them and basically didn't sleep, just went flat out for them and got really good letters of recommendation. And the Canadian match comes first and pulls you out of the American match. And I matched into Canada, but I certainly would have been, I think, in the mix for a spot at Lenox Hill had I not done it. So it's really about, one, figuring out what you want to do. And I think Luke has asked a question there, would I do anything differently? Which sort of comes into this. It's really trying to figure out at the end of your third year what you want to do, which sometimes is harder than it sounds. And then planning out basically what you want to do and where you want to do it. And then your whole fourth year is literally driven to allow you to do that. You have to do certain things as part of the SGU curriculum, but it's that planning that you get the electives. And often if you want someplace that's really popular or specialty that's really popular, you've got a plan. And some of the places make it a little bit harder for you. If you're outside the SGU network, they want 6 months notice. So being ahead of the game to be able to get those spots just takes planning. And sometimes you have to really stop and think about what you want to do and how you're going to do it.
Would you have done anything differently?
Not really. I mean, I suppose in hindsight, I wouldn't have done 2 years of engineering, but that's, and I think that is sometimes the strength. Somebody asked if it was competitive. That SGU has is, at least in Canada, getting to med school, you pretty much have to fit in the cookie cutter med student that they want. And if you've done something else, I went to the guy in my year from Toronto. He had a doctorate in genetics, couldn't get a spot, and then he is in the same program as I. Well, who I went to for all my genetics study stuff, but there's people with a whole variety of experiences that I think are slightly wider than a traditional, at least Canadian med school student might have. Often a little bit older too, I think. You guys probably have the stats on that.
Yeah, definitely. What made you choose orthopedics, surgery?
Well, funny enough, when I went into medicine, I swore I didn't want to be a surgeon, but there you go, another 180 for me. Most of it was from my own rugby-based injuries, to be honest. Spent a lot of time in various orthopedic departments and things, getting things fixed, and thought, oh, I really like that. And then once, I think one of the big things you'll figure out in your third year, do you like being in the operative theater or do you not? And if you're in the, wow, I really like this, then all the surgical specialties sort of come to a front. And if you're like, wow, I hate being here, hate being in theater, then that kind of takes them all out. And I was in one of the ones that liked it, had a really good mentor who was an orthopedic surgeon, and that really turned me on to it. And
you're in the right country for rugby too.
Yeah. My wife's still not sure that that's all just luck.
But I definitely, the Lions probably was the reason why you went there.
Yeah.
So, all right, any more questions, ladies and gents? Sure. Oh, did you get paid during the elective periods?
No, you don't get paid during med school.
Yeah. And just to add on to the elective bits, one of the good things about SGU as well, I feel, and having spoken to a lot of graduates like Dr. Enright, is at the moment we're sitting on just over 21,000 graduates, and they're practicing medicine in over 50 countries all over the world. And a lot of the, and maybe Dr. Enright might even do this at a later date, I don't know. A lot of the SGU graduates are very, very happy to have SGU students come and do an elective with them, wherever they are in the world. And this also bumps up your resume. So, later on down the line, some of you guys who are on here, maybe if you do come to SGU, we've got quite a good little network. We've got a few doctors in New Zealand, and maybe you can come and get a letter of recommendation in the holidays and stuff like that. Maybe you might do it. I don't know. A lot of the graduates do it. I'm not going to rope you in too much, but you can go to Australia, you can go to Africa, you can go. You can really, and these electives are a very good thing for you to do. And a lot of the SGU graduates do house for 2 weeks the student to sort of shadow them, for want of a better word. So we do that. So look, tomorrow evening, just a little bit of gardening, I'm going to do a presentation, and I will do lots of one-on-one presentations for those of you who want to know more about SGU. If you contact Bridget, Bridget will let you know events and everything like that. I will be again in New Zealand at the end of November, and I am super happy to come and meet you, visit you, see you, do anything you need. And it would be fantastic to hear from you. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to put in the chat, if you don't have WhatsApp, download it, and I'm going to put my number as well here, and you can 055 662 0529. And my email address, if you want to send me an email, so most of you know this because I recognize a lot of people's names here, is that. Okay, Dr. Enright, you're a legend. Thank you so much indeed. I'm so appreciative of you to take, and I know your life is busy as we've just seen. So thank you very much indeed for
no trouble. It's just good to see SGU here, and I think for the people that are watching tonight, like, the education you're going to get is just like you would get at a Canadian or American school, but to me anyways, there's a whole load of benefits. Not many people come out of med school saying that they've done it in 4 different countries. And if you like that sort of adventure and that sort of thing, that certainly appealed to me. So maybe it'll appeal to you too.
Brilliant.
I think you really brought it to life as well. It became a lot less academic hearing straight from, the doctor itself.
Yeah, you can read what courses you're going to take and stuff. And that, for me, never answered any questions. You're like, well, all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you so much. Really looking forward to meeting all of you. Thank you, Dr. Enright. Have a good evening. It's now.
You too.
Thanks very much.
Good night, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.